Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Brandience podcast series, Go Beyond, where we take a look at what's happening in today's marketing and think about also what's happening in the future. I'm excited about today's topic because it can go a lot of different places. And so this will be fun to have a great little conversation here. Our topic today is adapting creative across touch points. And as we all know, the media landscape continues to fragment, and people have a lot of different options about how and when they choose to receive your messages. And as brands, you have a lot of options on how you put those messages out there. So that means that your creative not only has to be good, but your creative also has to work. And so I'm happy to be joined by two Brandience team members today, Mollie Neff, who is Associate Creative Director, and Matt Roettgers, who's Art Director. So thank you both for being here, and let's dig in.
Let's do it.
The first area I thought we'd jump into is context and kind of design approach. And so thinking about fragmentation and all the different choices, Mollie, I'll throw this to you first. How does the where and when of the touch point influence your design approach?
Yeah, I think the context is key. So it kind of becomes like the co-designer. So you have to think about where are they seeing this? Is it on a billboard? Is it on a poster in a grocery store? Is it on a phone or a computer screen, television screen? And then you have to think about the when, so the mindset that they're in that situation. So is it loud? Is there a lot of things going on? Is it a split second? Are they driving? Are there other people with them? So you really have to take all of those things into consideration. And then depending on the answers to all of those, you kind of know which levers to pull with your design. So do I need my text to be a lot larger in this situation? Do I need the contrast of colors to be really apparent? Do I need to make my call to action giant? So yeah, I think you think about all those things and then you adjust your design accordingly. And it's going to change for every touch point and every platform, but thinking about that context is going to be key.
So it sounds like you really start with context over canvas. You're thinking context all the way before you get into that broad canvas
For
thinking.
sure, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about the strategy behind it before getting that. You have to think about all of those things before you get to that final design.
Yeah.
So,
How about you, Matt? Any thoughts on the touch points and context?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it starts with the brief. It starts with what is the client's objective? Like what, and the more information that is received by our team, the better. I kind of always said I prefer to design a poster first because that takes the brief and that puts anything and everything, all the information, dates, times, product, like whatever it is, it's everything. And then I can throw that onto one sheet. And then from there, it's a lot easier to kind of design from. Because it's, to me, and this isn't for everyone, it's easier to take stuff out than to put stuff in. And that's kind of how as you go from print to digital, that's kind of what you're doing. You are taking a lot of information and then narrowing it down to a very small segment that people can read in a second, or what makes them click a certain ad, or when they're flying down the highway, what's that one image that's going to stick in their head. So to me, like the smoothest all this can go is based on how well the brief is created at the very beginning.
I agree with that. I mean, it's the same idea of like if you're sending out an email, you have someone's attention span for a lot longer than if they're driving down the expressway seeing a billboard. So in an email, you kind of start with all of the information. You give them a couple of CTAs, you give them a couple pieces of information, some visuals. And then as you go to other platforms, maybe it's a social post, you got to get a little more concise because they're scrolling. So they're not going to stop and read every single little thing that you would put in an email. And then even more concise when you go to a billboard, like you said. So I agree with that 100%.
So things like tone, et cetera, those are shifting in your mind based on what you think the audience's mindset is at the time that they're going to be receiving that message. It
Yeah,
sounds like.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to really think, like I said earlier, if they're walking down a grocery aisle, depending on what product you're trying to sell them, I mean, maybe they have a cart full of kids that they have with them going through the grocery store. So you have to speak to that person individually and making sure that the voice is spot on so that they see it and they it grabs their attention.
So let's shift and Matt, you started to go here a little bit with some of your examples, but let's shift a little bit from context to more layout. So how does layout really adapt? How do you to fit the constraints of a particular medium?
Well, I mean, at the core of it is the size.
Mhm.
I mean, you have different sizes for print as you do digital. Where does it look like? If it's a print ad, then obviously you have more room, and you have uh, the customer, the viewer, has more time to look at it. But then once you get smaller, get into pixel sizes, then it's you have to take away a lot of the information that you originally started with. So when starting a campaign, you generally already have the brand tone, like the feel of the brand, the logo, the colors, the feel of that particular brand. So from the get-go, you already have that. And then from there is trying to figure out what the messaging is. What are you trying to sell, or what are you trying to tell people? And then from there, you have this arsenal of conceptual uh, artwork that you can pull from. And then at that point, it's really just, and it takes a lot. It takes a lot of time. I mean, I've been doing it for years, but to just kind of take something that's this big to this big is can be tough, because the client wants everything in there, but sometimes it's just, here's a visual, learn more.
Yeah.
So it just kind of going from these big posters to a little 300 by 250 ad. You have to understand what's important and get rid
It
of
can
all
be a
the
brain
other stuff.
teaser sometimes.
It really is. It's a puzzle.
Or
I mean,
Tetris. Yeah, what fits here, what makes sense.
yeah.
So Mollie, what role does visual hierarchy play as you think about different mediums or channels?
Well, what I was going to kind of piggyback on is just another thing to think about is your brand itself and where you're advertising. So, for example, if you are a local Cincinnati brand that is famous in the Cincinnati area and you're putting a billboard up on 75 going down the cut in the hill, I mean, people here already know your brand. Some brands around here, you could just make the billboard a certain color. You wouldn't even have to put a logo there. And people would know what brand that billboard was for. So I think you have to take your brand into consideration, not just the objective and what you're trying to get your audience to do, but how well is your brand known? Like, how do you have to portray your brand for general brand awareness before you get to that CTA or whatever the objective is that you're trying to get through to them? Because that's going to determine, okay, how big do I need to make my message or my call to action, and how important is that to whatever it is that the brief is created for? So just something else to keep in mind as you're kind of creating the hierarchy. And you usually have a lot to fit in a little space. Like Matt said, the client always wants all the information on every piece, but you just have to kind of look and judge what the most important pieces are for those specific platforms.
And you mentioned before, Matt, you were talking about, I think it was your example of, speeding down the highway with an outdoor board, and I guess some might call that dwell time. How long are people going to be?
Right.
I'm assuming you keep that in the back of your brain as you're working through your strategy, visual hierarchy, et cetera.
Right. Absolutely. Now, even with all the digital LED boards out there, you're getting less time that people have a chance. So if you're flying down and you see a printed board, you may have 5 to 8 seconds, maybe. But with these digital boards, you only have an eighth of that potentially. So it really is important, especially on the digital, or not digital, but any outdoor designs, is to kind of view it as this person's gonna view it as a snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell a story in one blink? And at that point, you have to start wondering about copy. Like it's not just here's the headline, here's the image, here's the logo. It's everything together. I mean, it has to be a snapshot of whatever it is. So it's important to like kind of not only understand it as a designer, but also be able to communicate that to your client, because it's important for them to know that you have to understand it. You only have a split second to see it, so to make them read a paragraph up there is kind of tough to do.
Right.
So it's got to be visually appealing, and it's got to get to the point quickly. And digital ads aren't that far from that.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to get a little bit more in there, but that's kind of where that design is. It's got to be a snapshot. It can't be 3 or 4 different elements in it. You have to be able to read it as a one message.
Yeah.
Yeah, the billboard is like the traditional. I mean, obviously, you're speeding down the expressway. You only have a very short period of time, but it's kind of similar, like you said, to digital ads and social.
Mm-hmm.
The attention span just isn't there anymore. So you really have to create something strategically so that you're catching that attention in that short period of time for them to just swipe, swipe, swipe. Kind of the same idea. Like, what's the most important thing here? What do I need them to really catch and hang on to?
So you both have mentioned a lot about tailoring creative based on the context, based on everything else that we've talked about. How in the world do you maintain brand consistency as you're working through tailoring everything for all of these different media?
Yeah, I think you have to be strong in building the framework of your brand. Knowing which parts of your brand are solid. They're the foundation. They're the parts that you are never going to change. Whether that's the visual parts of it, maybe it's your logo, that's never going to change, or maybe it's just the brand voice. You always want to speak to your audience in the same kind of way. But you have to determine what those things are, like what you want to stay true to. And then on top of that, determine, okay, so if this is my solid foundation, what parts am I willing to change depending on who I'm talking to? So am I talking to a younger audience? Maybe it's on TikTok, whatever. There's a certain way that you can talk to them there, as opposed to another audience on another platform. So you kind of change whatever those changeable assets are of your brand to cater to whoever it is that you're speaking to and where you're speaking to them at.
Mm-hmm.
And the bigger the arsenal you have, like the more branding, like the more polished your branding is, the more assets you can pull from, the easier.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you already have your color, you already have your fonts, you already have your logos, that's a start. I mean, that can be consistent throughout the whole campaign of any campaign. But just the more, I don't know, different types of headlines could maybe change depending on what audience you're talking to. So it's important to kind of have an understanding of the voice too, because that's an easy way to change the same visual to be different, but it looks the same, but the message is different. It could be "Have a great day," and the other one could be like "Let's go party." It can still be similar, but depending on where you're placing these ads, you're talking to a certain audience. So it's important as well to have like as many assets as possible.
Yeah, I think the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more things you're going to be able to build.
Right.
So I think that's awesome advice for anybody creating their brand or their toolkit, is to build it very complex. I mean, as many assets as you can to kind of bolster all of those different situations that you may find yourself in, and needing a piece that looks like this, or some headlines that sound like this. But to have more pieces in your toolbox to pull from is always going to be really helpful.
And brand awareness has to play a big part in that too, I would guess, in terms of a brand that has greater awareness allows you to maybe streamline some thinking, right? As you're designing. Any thoughts on how you think about a high brand awareness brand versus a low brand awareness brand?
Yeah, I mean, some parts you can kind of skip over if your brand is well known enough. There's parts that you don't have to worry about. You know, they're already understanding of what you're all about and what you're trying to tell them. So, you know, you can really hone in and focus in on whatever that CTA or call to action is, or whatever new thing that you're trying to make them aware of. So I think you really have to, like we said about the billboard earlier, you could make a billboard in one color and somebody might know what brand you're talking about if they're well known enough. But if not, again, it goes back to that strategy of really determining what the most important message is that you want to send out.
Yeah, and even for like the smaller brands that maybe aren't as big as the larger ones, it's at the beginning, it's just kind of about consistency. I mean, you have to build that voice, you have to build that tone, and it might take longer than someone who's already established in a certain territory. So it's important to just, if you're not seeing the results right away, you still have to kind of stick to it a little bit longer than you may think, because all these brands that people are familiar with, they stuck with it. And the longer you stick with your tone, once it's established, then I feel like you have, you know, the ability to kind of expand. But it's important to really like knock down that look.
Yeah, the
and
stronger
keep
the
it.
base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how
make it
long
go
has
around.
Coke been around?
Yeah.
They have their own red,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So that's not going away. And they adapted into everything they have. So, you know, was that something back in the 1800s that they're like, oh, we're going to stick with this red? Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to know that, like, in order to build that brand awareness, you have to kind of like be consistent and true to the originality of it.
Yeah. When you mentioned, Matt, results and obviously every client wants to measure what's working, what's not working. As you think about results, are there certain KPIs or feedback loops that help you measure whether your creative is successful?
Sure. I mean, that's probably a big time media person question. The way I feel like a campaign succeed is like, I'm a creative, so I step back, it's like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
that's my initial. Oh man, that's really cool. That's
KPI, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
with a K.
cool stuff.
Yeah.
But like when you get to the bones of it, obviously, you know, it's not. It doesn't always have to be like sales or like if there's a buzz. I mean, maybe there's a buzz around a certain campaign you worked on. So are people talking about it?
Yeah, social listening.
Social listening is important. And then all these things are starting to become like driven by data. I mean, you are definitely able to like capture all this stuff more so now than you ever have before. So, you know, obviously those results, you know, that I'll let the media guys hype up the clients with that stuff. But from a creative standpoint, success to me is like, did it answer the objective? Did we get it out there? Are people talking about it? Is it driving people to stores or is it driving traffic or whatever it is? But also, it's got to be something I'm proud of.
Sure.
I mean, it's got to be work that I sit back like, you know what? From start to finish, this has been a great campaign. And, you know, I hang my hat on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it has to be something you're proud of.
Passion for your work.
It's passion.
Yeah.
It's got to be passion for your work. Yeah.
One of my favorite things as far as like judging creative work is A/B testing. So making two pieces of creative and putting them out there and then seeing what the results are and adjusting based on that. Sometimes it's really eye-opening, and something you create that you think is going to do really well doesn't do so well, and vice versa. So you can really hone in on what people are resonating with and change the creative based on that. And I think we do a lot of digital display ads, and that's a really great place to do the A/B testing like that and see the results and see what's working and what's not.
So you were talking about what the client wants, client needs, obviously objectives. Matt, you started the whole thing off today talking about a creative brief. You both receive a lot of feedback from brands on your work, not only after the fact, but during the process as you're creating. What does good feedback look like or sound like for you?
To me, good feedback is, it's not a I like it, I don't like it. It's explaining to me what parts of it do you like what parts answered your objective, what parts didn't quite hit it. Like I'd prefer you to, like, I wouldn't say make me cry. We're sensitive folk, but I would say tell me what's wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear what's wrong with it so I can correct it for future, for present and future projects. Because if I'm not answering your question, then I'm not doing my job. So it's important not only for me to ask the questions, but for a client to actually come back with constructive feedback saying, okay, this isn't what I meant, this is what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be as simple as cheery to not cheery.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I may have not hit the mark on
Yeah.
that. And that always goes back to the creative brief. So it's important that we, both client and branding company, goes back to the brief and looks at it like, okay, where do we miss the mark? Where was something not communicated? Not the blame game. Don't want to do the blame
Sure.
game, but like let's knock this down. You know, and I pride myself on trying to get the concept across within 2 or 3 tries at the very beginning. Even if it's not the exact one, at least there's a path.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think just open communication, like, and the key word is communication, is let me know what I did wrong, or what let me know what I did right, and then let's go from there.
Yeah, I think it's about the context. So you could say you don't like it or you do like it, but give me something more, like you said. Like give me some context, which context is how we started this conversation today. But
Right.
I think it comes full circle both ways. I mean, I think when we are presenting creative work to clients, I think it's important for us to give them context in why we did what we did, why we made the design choices that we did, so that they have a little better understanding. I mean, they're paying us to do design work for a reason because they are not designers. So for us to give them some context and, like you said, really keep that open line of communication, and hopefully they'll come back with thoughtful responses that really include that context that you're looking for, to say, okay, well, you don't think it's, on brand, or you don't think that it's cheerful enough or sets the mood that you want to. And as long as there's context along with that, then it gives us a better idea of how we can change it and move forward to the next iteration.
That's great. No, good. Well, I think this has been a great conversation today about all things adapting, because there's quite a lot of flexibility that you have to think through and work through on a daily basis. So Mollie, Matt, thanks for being here today. And I want to thank you for listening to this edition of Go Beyond, and stay tuned for more content coming from Brandience in the future.